Dave, what's going on, man? Welcome to the Dad Edge, my friend.
Great to see you, Larry. I'm happy to be here with you today.
I am too. You and I were talking for me. So when I first started this podcast, my oldest was, oh my gosh, 9. So like college wasn't even on my radar.
No, no.
And now he's 17 and college is very much on my radar. So
Yeah.
I want to encourage men who, no matter what age your kid is, right? This is a podcast that you definitely have to have both ears on and listening to, right?
You're not going to get any argument from me, Larry.
Right, right. Before we jump in to, we're going to talk about college, how to choose college wisely. Some of the, I know some of the bear traps that probably parents and kids fall into when it comes to what they think might be important that might not be important. Keeping the things most meaningful on the horizon that they need to be, to make the best decision possible. But I want to just briefly talk about how you even got involved with doing what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. I've spent my career developing new products and services in a range of different industries. I was joking with someone the other day. I said, literally, I have worked on everything from toothpicks to turbines. And so I tend to look at problems and wonder, is the solution being offered to the market the best possible solution? And so I come at this actually as a dad. So with that mindset and that background and that expertise in developing new products and services, I started taking my oldest daughter, who's now 28, on college tours. And she had the privileges of a good guidance counselor at her high school. We hired a private college counselor for her as well. And we got to that first school on the top of her list on a college trip, which in and of itself is a bit of a luxury these days. And she said, "Dad, don't even get out of the car. Right? This is terrible. This isn't going to do it at all." And we'd driven about 8 hours to get there. And I said, "No, no, you're getting out of the car. We've come a long way, and this was the top of your list." And she said, "Well, no, it's just not right for this list." And anyway, we got out of the car, took the tour, and then jumped back in the car. And I said, "I tell you what, we're going to go have dinner, and you jump on Spotify and pick the right song for this mood we have. And I'm going to jump on Open Table and I'm going to grab a reservation that is something we're going to love." And sure enough, in about 3 seconds, both of those apps delivered perfectly. And it occurred to me as we were driving to the restaurant, how is it that this $250,000 college decision uses significantly less sophisticated matching technology than Spotify and Open Table to do really sort of meaningless kind of matching? But is that technology something that might work in college? And so that was really the genesis of this, to
Wow.
try to really put together a better outcome-based matching that says, I've got, my daughter had some patterns as a student, as a member of her sort of social group at school and her academic groups at school. There was a culture that she was looking for, and that technology could help her to find her place. And that was really where it all started for me.
That is fascinating. So I never even thought of it that way. The fact that you could just do a simple search on Spotify and find a piece of music that is fitting, or like go to Open Table and find a restaurant that's even like how we date now, right? For
Yeah,
single people. So
it's
that's
absolutely
how
how
we
it's how I met my wife on Match.com.
see. There you
Uh,
go.
yeah, and so I'm a big believer, right? They did a beautiful job for me in that sense. And it's as simple. If you think about, you get to the end of a movie on Netflix and it gives you that thumbs up, thumbs down, right? Did you like it? Did you not like it? And if you consistently teach it that, yes, I like this and I didn't like that, they're going to start to recommend for you the next thing you should watch based on what you have liked and disliked. Here are some people that liked and disliked similar things. And so you might like this that they've already tried and enjoyed. Now
Mm.
imagine that for college, right? The good news is the largest part of every college are the graduates. They're the people who have succeeded in that unique academic and social culture. And so using AI and some pretty basic data science these days, we can take a representative sample of those users, figure out sort of what the average answer is for what they thought was important to their success in and out of the classroom at that unique school. And in a 10-minute quiz, match a young person with the set of schools where they're most likely not just to get in, but actually to graduate, because there's a culture of academic and social nurturing that would work beautifully for them. And that they don't even have to be terribly articulate about what they're looking for. Just answer some simple questions, and that starts showing us those patterns.
Wow. So question for you then. I'm even going back to when I was trying to choose a college. And I remember when colleges would come and visit our high school for like a day or two or like a weekend, and then you could come just like go up to them and talk to them at their table. Kind
Yep.
of fun, kind of funny, but I'm sure it's pretty common. One of the things that actually intrigued me to go look at a college further by how cool their brochures looked,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Not the best rationale there, Larry. I mean,
No, not at all.
it might actually be indicative of something, but probably not. Right. And
Right,
there are a lot of little false flags like that along this process. And to go back to the dating app piece, I think the Common App today, and the Common App has been around since 1975, so it's not new, but it's used much more frequently today. And the Common App makes it so easy for kids to just say, well, I'm going to apply to this one and this one and this one and this one, that it's become a little bit like Tinder, right? So kids treat this in their teenage minds, not all teenagers, right? There are a lot of 20 somethings and adults who need to go back to college too. But for that audience of teenagers coming out of high school, they tend to think of this process as Tinder. I'm going to send out as many apps as I can to as many schools as I can because I need someone to go out with me. I need someone to say yes. And it kind of clouds our judgment and makes us look at things like, well, brochures, or geez, they've got a great looking pool, or the gym looks good, or I took a tour and the dorm was nice. Um, we had lunch and the food was good. Those are not unimportant things, but
right,
not the most important thing. And so that's where we want to try to help students without burdening them with, a 3-hour SAT. We want to give them a 10-minute quiz and say, what are the set of academic and social conditions where you thrive? And when we were building this technology, we talked to industrial psychologists and we said, what are we looking for here? It's not personality, right? Because personality matching is not what we're talking about. We want to have as diverse a campus as possible, which has every kind of personality. Instead, they talk about psychological safety, which to the uninitiated sounds very fancy, right? But to me, who's not a psychologist, they said, look, it's turtles and what conditions are going to get that turtle to stick their head out of their shell, right? That's where they feel safe. And so academically and socially, what are the set of conditions where you're going to stick your head out and say, I can be my best self here, right? I can express myself without fear of people laughing at me or making me feel bad. I'm going to go and teachers are going to engage with me if that's what's important to me, or I'm going to sit in a big lecture hall if that's what's better for me. But it's about finding that culture where I can be my best self. Because at the end of the day, that fit and that ability to be your best self and to grow as a person in these really important years is so much more important than the rank of your school. Where is it on US News and World Report is the worst, least helpful thing you could possibly focus on in this industry.
I love that you use that term, psychological safety. That's a term that we actually use a lot in our community and in this podcast. Even one of the skills that we teach with how to have, difficult conversations with your kids. How do you first create an environment of psychological safety where they can
Yeah,
be their most authentic selves? And I love the fact that you
absolutely.
intertwine that into what you guys do. I really want to highlight on, I know you said like, oh, it's the way the campus looks or the brochure, or the way the food is or whatever else. What are some of maybe the pitfalls that people, or the bear traps that people don't realize is maybe a part of the decision that you might be surprising? So like, for instance, as me and my oldest go and start looking at colleges, there are things that I'm expecting him to be like, oh, I like this and I like that. And then there are some things that I don't know what I don't know. And I'm not really sure like what things might come up that might surprise me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, the I think one of the most helpful things that parents especially can do is to give that longer term perspective and ask some other types of questions for the student. And examples of that to me would be, what is the graduation rate at this school?
Okay.
And what is the job placement rate at the time of graduation at this school? Another one that almost never gets asked is, um, what is the alumni engagement rate at this school? So if you think about when you graduate, and then what percent of the students actually stay in some way engaged with that school for a lifetime? Because in the same way that the school, or should be the student, is treating this like it's Tinder, right? They're just looking for dates. The school is actually looking for people to marry, right? When they send you that offer letter, they're not offering to go out on a first date. They're actually asking you to marry them and be married for a lifetime. And if you're a student, you're able to actually find that connection. That's so valuable, right? You probably know those friends who just love their undergrad school, right? They've got a closet
Yeah.
full of sweatshirts from that school. They talk about it. They watch the games on TV. They visit from time to time. They might take online courses with them. They might travel with a professor. I don't have that. I would have loved to have that. And I think that the opportunity for students and for schools is to find that. And if you can find it, you're much, much more likely to actually achieve that graduation success. And so asking in schools to talk about their alumni engagement rate is one way to get at sort of rephrasing how connected are your community members to your school. When they finish their degree, do they just leave and never look back?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you went to a restaurant and said, yeah, that was fine, and I'm never going there again.
Never going back.
Right. Would that be a really great recommendation for that restaurant?
No.
No, you want to become your neighborhood. Like, that's my place. Right. And so try to ask questions that get at that same issue. And alumni engagement, the engagement with professors is another great one to talk about. And we get at that in the quiz that we administer. We ask kids, hey, when you run into a challenge, do you talk to the teacher? Do you Google it? Do you talk to your friends? And you start to look for those patterns of, hey, this is a school that really puts a premium with their teachers on engaging with students. And students who really value that and really like to learn from those teachers should probably go to those schools. And that doesn't mean that's the universal best way to teach. But the way a school teaches is as important as the academic aptitude of the average student. And too often today, the average GPA or the average SAT score is used as this proxy for academic fit. And it really isn't. It just means that the kids had a sort of a transcript that looked about the same. And that's not unimportant, but it's not the whole story. It's not really fit. It's just aptitude.
Mm. These are things I would have never thought of. It's just being really honest, because I went to college and I really didn't do much with the university after I graduated, like really nothing at all. I don't even go back to homecoming. Not that my college experience wasn't good. It was very good. I enjoyed the heck out of it, but it's not a relationship that I'm wanting to continue into quote unquote marriage. Right.
Right.
But then I have these friends. I live in St. Louis, so Mizzou is a big, attractive school for a lot of people. And it amazes me. I was like, God bless you. People have so much spirit. Like, it just blows my mind. I'm like, they go to all the games still. Like, they'll drive 2 hours to go see these football games, and then they still go to homecoming. And I'm like, wow, that was not my experience. But I never thought of it like that. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, in this day and age too, where it's not even so much about the physical presence on campus, because technology affords us so many ways to interact with our school.
Yeah.
And if you think about the lifetime of learning that we all look for today, you're going to change careers multiple times in a lifetime today. There's going to be new technologies and new things that come up that you're going to want to learn about. And if the default in your mind was, I get my education from Mizzou, that you're going to instinctively go and sort of, what has Mizzou got to offer me in this area, creates incredible security and value for you as a learner for your lifetime, and for them for their lifetime. Because right now, the business model for most schools is, I'm going to sell you one degree, take you 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever, but I'm going to sell you one degree. And then for the rest of your life, I'm going to chase you to give me money for nothing, right? I'm going to, annual fund time, it's going to be like, hey, can you contribute? Can you, and people, we all avoid those conversations like the plague, right? And imagine if it was different. Imagine if you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm not too sure what this crypto thing is about. And so let me see what Mizzou's got. They've got a 2-hour certification course on crypto that I could take online. And I know, that would be done in a way that would really resonate with me. And there's tremendous opportunity with technology if you can find your fit. And so that lifetime fit becomes even more important to both learner and school in today's world.
Does the questionnaire that you have on your website, does it also help people who are looking, let's just say you have a typical, student who's in high school and they're like, I think I know what I want to do, but I'm not really sure
Yeah.
what I want to do, and maybe help them with that decision a little bit.
Um, we are moving in that direction. We have ambitions. I mean, we are a 3-year-old company, and so we're getting better every day. And our ambition really is to help people find their passion and their people and their place, and kind of in that order. So if you can, think about the average teenager. Your son he's a sophomore. Has he ever used the verb to major in his life?
No.
I mean, until he started to get into this process, and you started to talk about, well, what are you going to major in? It's just not part of their vernacular. They just don't know what that means. And so if we start to think about that, to say, well, look, we can actually use technology to help you figure out what you're passionate about, right? Where you feel that psychological safety, that return to you of, yeah, this one really turns me on. And it could be gaming, it could be politics, it could be art, it could be whatever, right? And they don't really know how to follow that thread and say, well, I'm passionate about this. These are the 10 majors that could potentially satisfy and that could take me into these schools with these types of career opportunities. That's a lot of stuff, right? So technology can definitely help. And we're moving in that direction. We want to help kids first find that passion and then say, well, people that are passionate about what you're passionate about have enjoyed these kind of majors, and people that learn the way you learn and are looking for a social culture the way you kind of are excited have found success in these schools. And then to connect them with the alumni and look at more in those long-term questions about the school to say, wow, so what kind of careers did those majors go on to enjoy? And can I talk to some of those people? And what kind of ROI is there, right? If I'm going to spend X amount for this degree, then is that worth it?
Yeah.
My daughter went off to a private university and was thinking she wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And she'd be paying those loans for the rest of her life if she wanted to go be a third grade teacher. And she could get this. There's just a lot of different ways to do it. So that ROI piece of it is another piece. But and we can talk maybe separately about this. But too many people as well bring that financial lens first and say, well, I can only afford A, B, and C types of schools, and so I'm not even going to look at these other ones. And I would tell you all day long, don't do it that way. Do the opposite. Find your fit academically and socially, and then explore whether there's financial fit. Because the schools really want to invest in the students where there is that potential lifetime learning relationship. So if you find those other two, then schools will today probably try to find a way to make the financial piece fit.
Fascinating. Really, really fascinating. And yeah, question I have for you about just individuals that learn different ways. So that sounds like that's part of this process, is to really vet out like how does this individual learn best? Like what environment do they learn best in? What have you found as far as, the types of learners that are out there? Like what types of learners are out there, and how does this vet out that learner?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are all types. I just look at my own family. I've got one daughter who is a very scientifically minded young woman. She wants to go into nursing. She learns really well by going to the library, isolating herself, making note cards, memorizing, and she does tremendously well. My other daughter could not get enough of the sorority life, wasn't as serious of a student. Both are doing exceptionally well today, but both learn very, very different ways. Some of that difference exhibits itself through major choice, right? I mean, you can, if you want to do certain activities, they're more conducive to certain types of learning. But generally speaking, the pedagogy of a school, how they teach, is a really relevant thing here. And some schools, for example, are really focused on hands-on learning versus come to the lecture hall and we will give you a lecture and then you go away and think about it. And it's sort of up to you as an older college age student now to learn some of these things yourself. And there are other academic environments where it's, hey, come sit in a circle of 10 people and we're going to meet every day of the week instead of once a week in a big lecture hall. And we're going to have a conversation and there's going to be no place to hide. And there's going to be no one who cares if you don't show up to the lecture. There are all kinds of different academic styles that, again, young people, we don't expect them to be terribly articulate about that. Some level of self-awareness is not assumed to be overly high for the average teenager. And that's fine. It wasn't for me. Well, I doubt it was for you. And that's as it should be. So what we've tried to do in this quiz is in about 10 minutes, ask you a set of questions about your learning and social culture preferences, kind of what turns you on and turns you off in the classroom and then socially, and then be able to use that information to then pattern match with people that have answered the same way, who've already graduated or are currently enrolled in the kind of schools that you might be interested in.
That is amazing. Seriously, that's amazing. Um, as far as let me ask you this. Take, your last year of people
Yep.
that you've helped, right? Parents and students, and you've been able to use this process to really vet out like, hey, let's really this process will really help you figure out the best environment. I would just love to hear maybe one or two just success stories of going through this process, maybe some things that they were uncertain about, things that they weren't really sure about, and then on the other side of it, call it whether it's their after their very first year and they're just like, holy crap, like I am home, like couldn't
Yeah.
have asked for a better experience. And just how you went about that process.
Yeah. So, we are still in this phase where I started the company in the beginning of 2020 and kind of working on the idea. I don't come from higher education, don't come from an admissions background. And so for me, there was a lot of learning curve here. So we developed the product, developed the idea, built the matching platform, and then tested it with a couple of schools in last year's enrollment cycle, with 3 schools in Western New York, and learned a ton through that process. We marketed the site to kids across the U.S. who were juniors and seniors. We had over 100,000 kids come to the site. We actually had students from 183 different countries register with us, which was despite my best efforts to keep the marketing really tight
Yeah.
around US students.
Yeah.
The number of students globally who are looking for, searching best fit for me kind of college in the US really surprised us. And so we are in sort of right in the beginning of our first full season of engaging with schools and selling this to schools. And so I'd love to tell you that I've got all this really profound detail, but I'll give you a couple of anecdotes
Please.
along the
Yeah.
way. One parent, a father, actually, that I shared this with recently, and he said to me, I have 2 daughters, and my older daughter is kind of the star, right? Everything just comes easily to her. And her younger sister is 3 years younger. Um, and I just am always afraid she lives in her shadow. And his immediate reaction when we talked about Troove is this is going to be so helpful to my younger daughter because right now, all she does is look at where her sister is going off to college and she knows she probably can't get in there and she feels terrible about herself. And with this, she's going to look at this and take this quiz and then be lined up with all these schools where people just like her have gone and found incredible success and the ability to engage with those schools and have them say, we love you for you. He's like, that's going to make such a difference in my daughter's high school experience. She's not going to have to live in someone else's shadow. She's going to find her own path and her own sense of worth. And that's going to be such a huge victory for her. And so that just, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just for,
Yeah.
for remembering the conversation with this friend of mine, who is such a good dad. And that was his first reaction was, that's what it's going to do for his daughter.
You know what's so fascinating is I love the fact that you don't have experience with this. In other words, you haven't been on the like admissions side of it and all this other all these other things that you could be. You're a parent and you had this, you crossroads yourself and you decided to make a solution for it,
Yeah.
right? It's very similar to, we've been partnering with a company for probably 4 or 5 years now called Bark, which is an app that you can put on your kids' devices that monitor, cyberbullying and depression and all that by finding
Yeah.
keywords. And it was made by parents who had no tech background whatsoever. They just would be like, could we somehow create something that would help us keep better eyes on our kids as far as their devices? Because that would be awesome. And that's how they did it. And you've
Right.
done the same, which is fantastic. I even love it. I can really, really relate to that story. I think the majority of men who listen to this podcast have multiple children. Very few are raising the one, the one and only.
Mm-hmm.
And that dynamic is a very real thing for families, and siblings living in each other's shadow. And I'm not as, and we preach all the time in this house with four boys, none of you is better than the other. You're different. You're all just very, very different.
Right.
As it relates to, I want to dive into the learning aspect just a little bit more, because I think it's very apparent nowadays. It wasn't, I don't know, so much so when you and I were little. It's kind of like, hey, if you don't fit into this box of education, then you just don't fit into this box, and we're going to put you in the corner with your dunce cap on. Congratulations, right?
Right.
But
Right.
there's a huge understanding of people learn differently now. And for let's just say somebody comes to the site, they start filling out the questionnaire. How does the questionnaire work to really ascertain what type of learner a student is?
Yeah, so we start out with a couple of demographics, and we start with some questions, kind of, where you are, and how old you are, and all those types of things, just because we need that information to be able to connect you. But then we start to get into: are you looking for 2-year college, 4-year college? How far from home do you think you might be interested in going? And so we have a data set of over 4,000 schools in the system now. And that's nowhere near enough. That's it's almost all of the 2 and 4-year colleges and universities in the US, but it doesn't include trade schools. And I don't believe that the answer for every student is a bachelor or an associate's degree, maybe not right away out of school. And that you can have a fantastic life learning a trade, building a business, working with your hands. I think those are equally valid ways to live a purposeful, great life that our society maybe turns its nose up a little bit at. And so I want to make sure that the fact that we're starting with matching you for colleges isn't seen as a judgment against other options. And ultimately, we'd like to use the same technology to match you with where you most want to go. But then within the academic sphere, we start to just really try to triangulate how you learn best. And so what are the experiences that maybe you haven't thought of that you would enjoy? What's your first reaction to, do you think you learn better in the classroom or out of the classroom? When you participate in a group, how do you form that group? Do you just get with your friends? Do you go find the smart kids in the class? Do you try to find a diversity of perspectives and see those patterns of engagement?
Wow.
And we already mentioned the idea of, where's your go-to when you run into a challenge? Do you go see your teacher? Do you go see your parent? Do you Google it? Do you just get down on yourself? What we try to get an understanding as to sort of what that MO looks like for most students. Study abroad is another way. A lot of kids haven't thought about that as a potential option, but reacting to it, everyone can react to it. And some kids are going to say, you know what? Hadn't thought about that. Don't know if I can afford it. That's kind of scary, but yeah, let me check the box that says I might be interested in that. And there are other kids who are like, nope, that's just not for me. And that's fine. And so different schools are built around different kind of educational journeys and teaches in different ways. And, there are some schools out there where students spend very little time on campus, or they might start out intentionally not coming to campus, but they're sending them off on some experience. So there are all kinds of different ways in that 4,000 school set of potential options to find one or a smaller group that really resonates with how you learn without having to come to Troove and say, these are the 17 specific academic cultural atmospheres that I'm looking for. No, it's not that at all. It's a much simpler quiz that, we really tried to find a way to engage with these kids in a way that they will find normal and helpful and non-threatening. So, they like to take quizzes all the time online. So this is, give us 10 minutes and we'll help find the subset of schools that you should then go try to engage with, and then maybe take a virtual tour or go, click through some of the information on our site or their website. And then if you want to and you're able to and you can go to campus, great. If you want to meet with some other students who've already been there, great. All those things are possible today.
That is so cool. I just some self-reflection that I had. So I went to a larger university my first year of college, and the classrooms were monsters, right? I think in my psychology 101 class, we had 300 people in there. It
Yeah.
was nuts. And I just struggled the bigger the classroom, the more I struggled.
Yeah.
And I went to a different school my second year of college, and then finished up there, went the next 4 years there, and just thrived. And the college was literally a third of the size, and all
Yeah.
of my classes, I mean, I had one class, I think there was 100 people, but it was anatomy and physiology, but all my other classes, it was like 30.
Yeah. And
And
Larry, the way we asked that question, so if you go back to your, junior, senior high school self, you probably couldn't have articulated that
no,
that was an issue for you,
no, not
right?
at all. Yeah.
And the way that the industry solves this problem today, or not solve the problem, but at least gets through this, is they ask the teenager, do you want a big school or a small school? And that in and of itself is a silly question, because
Yeah.
I've talked to kids who live in rural communities where their high school is 100 kids, and other kids who live in Brooklyn, right? And their high school has 8,000 kids. And if you ask those two kids that same question, do you want a big school or a small school? The kid who goes to the 8,000 person high school is thinking, 40,000 is probably a big school. Whereas the kid in the 100 person is thinking 5,000 would be a massive school. And so the question in of itself is sort of a junk question. And in fact, the data would tell you today that there's essentially a flip of the coin, that the percent of students who graduate within 6 years from the first institute they enroll in is 51%. So half the students who go to college transfer or drop out. And we have to be able to do better, because there's an emotional toll, a financial toll that comes with that churning. And if we can just help get some of those kids to a better place up front, I think the whole system wins. The schools win, the students win, the parents win, the bank account wins. It's all better.
I had no idea the percentage was that high,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. It's,
I'm also kind of not surprised by it either.
yeah. I mean, look, you and I are having a conversation. You and I both transferred. We both
Right.
made it through. We both graduated. It's all fine. But man, I would have liked to have known up front, myself maybe a little bit better. And I couldn't have been articulate about specifically what it was. But I ended up going from a bigger school to a smaller school, to an academic and a social culture, which was just a little bit more kind of school focused and classroom focused, as opposed to being in a bigger city. And most high school students think that college is going to be this incredibly intense academic experience. And it is in a sense, but it's not in the high school sense.
Right.
Where in high school, you get on the bus at 7 a.m. and you get home after practice at 5 or 6 o'clock. You grab a Pop-Tart, and then you're doing homework for 4 more hours. That's intense. And they think that college could only be more. And it's just not, right? You have all this time. And if you're taking 15 credit hours and you're doing 2 hours of homework for every class, you're still spending almost 2/3 of your time in non-academically related social settings in college, right? So even a full-time student just is spending a minority of their time in academic pursuit in college. And so being able to find that culture that fits for you in and out of the classroom is kind of a big deal.
And that's absolutely true. It's interesting because my high school experience was much different than college, and those numbers definitely align for sure. I want to get to how you help beyond just the questionnaire. So, a young man, young woman goes online, they take the quiz, they understand what their profile is, what their preferences are, but then there's still big choices to be made. And the story I'm telling myself is, and basically being one of your avatars, right, is like, okay,
Right.
we now know this information. What do we do now?
Yep. Yeah. So you can, as a student, the experience is pretty straightforward. You take this quiz once, and you could be a sophomore, junior, senior, doesn't really matter. And then we have the ability to match you against any school in that 4,000 school data set. And so that the top of your ranking list, and schools are ranked as either green, yellow, or red. So let's keep it simple and just say, these are the green schools. And we give you kind of, the way the SAT is math and verbal, we give you academic and social fit, and it's green, yellow, or red. And so pretty basic. And we say, all right, look, these are the schools, green, green, these are the ones that are the best. And we're not saying, so you have to go to one of those. You make up your own mind, right? We're saying, do this early in the process, ideally, and then be able to say, okay, look, I'm a green fit academically and socially. Let me contact the school, because maybe I hadn't heard of them. maybe I wasn't thinking a little bit more expansively about where I might be willing to go to school. I'd never heard of the school, and wow, this is so great. And it just, you start engaging with them and it's ringing these bells. And you're like, wow, these are my people, right? I hear that phrase a lot, where I just want to find my people. And so we're trying to help you find your people. But if you are, if you took it as a sophomore or as a junior, you want to come back and say, you know what, I've kind of grown up a little bit in the last 6 months, or my views have changed on some of these things. Let me take it again, or let me adjust these questions. You can do that. And as you go through the process, Troove is designed to be able to support that student throughout this kind of long, potentially multi-year process, where you take the quiz, and then if you come back to it a few months later and say, hey, you know what, my friend was just asking me about the University of Missouri. And I hadn't thought about that. Well, let me type that in. You start typing in Missouri, it pops up, you click on it, and you find your fit scores immediately as to whether you're individually a good fit for the academic and social culture at Mizzou. And so that ability, we want to turn this into a verb, right? I want people to start saying, is this a good fit for me? Just Troove it. Troove it becomes the verb in the category, right? It's Google, it's Uber, it's Troove. Just Troove it. That's the way to find if it's a great fit for me in and out of the classroom. And so trying to help through that multi-year process, and also be able to help you have a conversation with your parents, or conversely with your student. And to say, hey, I've been thinking about this school for you, to your son or your daughter. Why don't you just Troove it really quick and see whether that's a good one? And maybe for those parents that maybe are pushing a little bit on, well, I went to Michigan State, you should go to Michigan State.
Right.
Right. And that happens all the time, and maybe for really good reasons. But then you can Troove it and say, hey, Dad, you know what? I'm not actually a good social fit. And here are the things that I was looking for that they don't have. And it's probably not the right culture for me. That's a more productive, psychologically safe way to have that conversation than just to say, it was good enough for me, it's good enough for you.
Yeah. That is so true. There's a lot of parents out there that, hey, I went here, so you should too. I even went to a high school where there was a lot of people that graduated from that high school that they wanted their sons to go there. It was an all boys high school, and it's interesting. That was not a relationship I wanted to marry into, but I had friends that I graduated with that was their view of it. Well, I love this acronym, just Troove it and to find out the fit. As far as when you say, so we've talked about how kids learn, and we've talked about academics. I am so curious, because you've mentioned a couple of times now, the social needs and the social setting and the culture. I would really love to know how the Troove it system really works to really understand what's the culture like, what's the social like.
Yeah. So, some of that is amenities based. You're looking for these types of things. And those could be things on campus. They could be things surrounding campus. So I love to hike. We try to ask kids, what do you like to do with your friends? What's your definition of a good time? And that's not literally the phrasing of the question, but that's what we're getting at. When you have the free time and that's one of the areas where students really struggle when they get to college is, wow, I've got all this free time. I've got all these choices I can make about how I spend my time. Am I going to do it productively, not productively? And so our hope is that by filling it up with, filling your time with things that you have found to be important to you, or ways of engaging with others in activities, organized activities, individualized activities. Do you look for leadership positions in different activities? There are all kinds of ways to look at these types of options we have. And, one of the important tenets of this, and this, not coming at this as somebody from the industry, I want to build a platform where we just continue to absorb more and more data. And we have the technology now to just get smarter and smarter and smarter. So as we go, we keep sort of strapping on new data sets. And as we start to learn about what turns kids on and off, it can be as simple as weather, right? So let's include a weather data set in here and say, what kind of weather do you like? Or what activities do you like? And let's relate that back to weather. So there's this sort of this constant desire on our part to get more data and to really try to embrace all the different opportunities that you've got and ways to spend time in college, and how you interact with each other is really, really important, I think, to that. Because, like I said before, diversity is key in any school. And so this is not about just finding kids who are like you in that personality sense. It's about finding kids who have values and priorities and interests that might be in common with you, but expressed very differently from a demographic standpoint, backgrounds, religions, all those things that we like to have a really rich community around us. If we can find the connective tissue that say these are the things that we all sort of have in common in terms of the values of a community that we're looking for, then we can have even more diversity in our schools, which was just nothing but a good thing for everybody.
It's really interesting that you say that. All the things that you just said. Um, test. Hang on. My mic is going out. You hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you. Yep.
It's really weird. Okay. It was going out there for a second. So when I actually took my ACT to get into this one college that all of my friends were going to. That's where I really wanted to go. That was really pulling me there. Well, I didn't know much about that school. I just went on kind of like one tour and I was like, yeah, all my friends are here. Great. This is where I want to go. Well, my ACTs actually weren't high enough for me to get in there. And what I'll tell you was it was the biggest blessing in disguise, because actually it's kind of weird, but the location. I'm a very outdoors person. I like good weather. I don't like small towns. I do not like small towns, like as far as living there. And this college was like literally the only thing in this rural neck of the woods up in Northeast Missouri. And I would go there to visit my friends and I'm like, oh my God. I was like, I am so glad I actually didn't get in here. Like I would be freaking out. Instead, I was in Southeast Missouri, where the weather was quite a bit better. There was tons of things that we could do. It was just small enough, just big enough. It wasn't a huge city, but it definitely wasn't a small town. It was this perfect fit, but I didn't know what I didn't know back then. I even had one of my kids, we went to University of Ohio, or we went to Ohio State for a football game. And one of my sons was like, oh my gosh, this would be so amazing. Like, I was like, well, there's this many students here. It's really, really big here. I was like, I know you like small groups. He's like, there's that many people here. I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, he's like, I don't know if I would really like that. But it's when you and I were choosing a school, I don't know if if that was on our radar. Even like you even mentioned like the weather, which seems like a very minor thing, but if you're not a winter person and you go up to University of Minnesota, you're like, oh my gosh, like they get like that would
Right.
add to any misery that you're already feeling maybe at school versus
Sure.
helping.
Sure.
Right.
And so what do you do? If you hate the weather, you're going to stay inside, probably stay in your room. You're going to start to feel isolated. You're going to feel bad about yourself. You're going to think everyone else is having a good time, and it's going to spiral. Right. And it's interesting. I was having a conversation with the head of enrollments admissions from a small college in Pennsylvania recently. And his school total enrollment's about 1,500 students. And I said, tell me which school you typically lose candidates to. And he said, it happens all the time. We lose them to Penn State. I said, okay, so Penn State total enrollment is 90,000 students. Okay. Undergraduate enrollment at Penn State's about 40,000. And you're 1,500. Right. So they are, 25 times your size.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, who is the student for whom that is, it's either A or B, right? It's either tiny little school or Penn State. They're so distinctly different. And the reason that one would sort of get stuck trying to make that choice is, well, I know Penn State. I grew up in Pennsylvania. It's cheap. All my friends go there. One of my parents went there, whatever. Those are the typical rationales like you just articulated. That is not the formula for long-term fit and success at Penn State University, right? You're going to get there and say, this just doesn't fit me very well. I'm putting on this pair of pants because all my friends have this pair of pants, and it turns out they're just not the good pair of pants for me.
Right.
And so to talk to that smaller school head of admissions and say, wouldn't you rather be able to see the kids in your prospect pool for whom your school is a really good cultural fit in and out of the classroom, that they're really going to appreciate that smaller academic environment, that greater connection to their classmates and their professors, the fact that their social life is probably going to revolve around each other and campus a little bit, whereas Penn State, You got all these bars and sororities and fraternities and giant lecture halls. And it's a wonderful environment if that's what you're looking for. But you shouldn't be looking at both of those thinking that's my A or B, right? Those are just two decidedly different kind of, it's a subcompact and a giant SUV are my two choices for car. No, it's just not a good choice.
That's fascinating. And that's so true too. I really want to pick your brain about, let's say, we start the process with Troove, right? We really understand what does our profile look like? What do our green schools look like? And now we know what kind of learner we are. We know what kind of the culture it is over there. But let's just say we get to the point where we start having conversations with our kids, right? Around this stuff. I got to be honest, man. I don't know what I don't know. And I feel as a parent, and I know a lot of the other guys listening to this podcast, we're all parents. It's like, how do I even talk about this? What are the words that I use? What are the questions I ask? How do I be the best guide when I don't even know what I'm doing?
Yeah. 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 I think the easiest answer is just to have your son or daughter take the Troove quiz. So Troove is free for the student, free for the family. There's no charge for you to use the system. So let them take the quiz, and then you can go through the fit results, and you can go look at any school you want to. So you can say, let's start at the top of the list, and they're in order of priority in terms of total, highest score first, and kind of work your way down and say, let's dig into some of these, and then have a conversation. Use it as a thought starter, as a conversation starter, and say, well, geez, this is your highest ranked school. Let's talk about that. Does this resonate with you? And it says, it fits with you because of it's in alignment with your answers to all these different questions. Talk to me more about that. You said that, you don't really want to interact with your teachers, with your professors. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about my experience in school. I think it's a great way to use those questions as conversation starters and as points to learn. And you can then look at the school, and we actually give you the ability to rank those and say, you know what, again, thumbs up, thumbs down. I know I ranked really high with this, but it's not something I actually do like. And so that actually helps from algorithmically, that helps me to sort of learn and make my technology smarter. But it might also inform, you said you wanted this and this and this. Do you really want that? Because that's in the school form, then what that kind of school looks like. So it's actually something that really lends itself well to a parent and a child going through together and reviewing the results. And if you said, hey, let's pull up Ohio State and just Troove Ohio State really quick and see whether that would be a good fit. And if your answers are more kind of small school kid, it's going to show up in the results to say, this probably is a not a great fit. It could be yellow, could be red fit for you. And these are some other schools you might want to consider. So I'd really use it as that conversation starter and as the ability to be more specific in these conversations instead of just generally kind of swirling around this saying, well, we got to figure this out. This is a way for parents to help have a guided conversation and have some results that if the results you think are wrong, if the student says, Dad, I appreciate we talked about that. I didn't really think through the sorority or fraternity thing very much. And it is or isn't important to me. Let me go back and it's really simple to change that answer and then drive different results.
Interesting. Does it also have, if you want, is there a question in there around distance from home?
There is, yeah. So you go through and you geographically say, hey, this state would be either something I actively am interested in, I'm sort of neutral on this, or I definitely want to avoid that area. And so you can drive it that way. We haven't got this feature yet, but it's on my roadmap to add, because I want to have, you remember the Staples easy button, right?
Oh
where
my gosh.
you just push it, right?
I just literally used that statement today.
Okay. So here's my easy button, right? There are going to be some schools, if you took geography completely out of the mix, and geography is actually the first go-to criteria for most kids.
I can see that.
Right. And the statistic is that 75% of students go to school within 100 miles of home.
Okay.
Okay. And maybe there are really good choices within 100 miles of your home. But the easy button is this. If you take my quiz and you match with a whole bunch of schools and say, what if geography didn't matter? And you were able to find some schools that are just phenomenal for you. where you never would have thought about it because you would have said, no, 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 that's, that's 1,000 miles from home. And maybe that's not practical. Maybe it won't work, but wouldn't you like to know? Wouldn't you like to just have a little time to explore and say, you know what? If nothing else, let's have a conversation about why that one resonates for you.
Yeah.
We just started working with a school here in Burlington, Vermont, that is a small liberal arts school that tends, like most little liberal arts schools, it draws a fairly geographically tight sort of New Englandy kind of, like, within 100, 200 miles of their school. But they've got these incredible gaming and business majors with really sort of interesting entrepreneurial teachers and course design. And I just am so excited to see what happens with this, because for them to be able to find students that would be incredibly excited about that kind of academic environment in the kind of really cool little college town of Burlington, Vermont, if that works for you, it's not going to be on the radar screen for a lot of kids today.
Right.
What if we could put it on the radar screen?
Yeah.
If nothing else, it helps them define what they want and find it closer to home. But for those other kids who say, you know what, I think I want to go talk to them. And then you talk to them and they say, you know what, Larry, you are our kind of kid, and we'd love to have you here. We found special scholarship money for you. We have need-based, we have merit-based, we have all kinds of ways we're going to make this work. And so being open to those possibilities, I think is why you should, as a parent, kind of get into this process sooner rather than later. And this gets a very pressurized kind of final 6 months for these students. And so to the extent that you can lengthen that runway for them, open the communication channel, give yourself more information, have some data-driven ways to talk to your son or daughter about this, I think you're going to be serving them much better.
That is so cool. What an incredible system you have there. Do you still have a few minutes? I'd love to ask you a couple more.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So as a noob parent, right? Two questions, actually. Number one, my oldest is a sophomore. Do I need to start having these conversations with him about college now? So, or if not, when? The second question is, when we actually start to do tours, like, I don't know what I'm looking at either as a parent. Like, as far as like, what are we actually looking for here? What are the most important things? Like, yeah, the campus is great, or yeah, the amenities are great, and here's what the dorm rooms look like, and here's what these degrees that we specialize in look like. But what are the things that maybe I don't have my eyes on that I should?
Yeah. So the temptation in this, well, let me step back. I am an advocate. It's not the only way to do this, but I'm an advocate for getting started in this conversation sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Because you can have a conversation that's pretty low pressure with a sophomore.
Right.
This isn't about tomorrow. It's okay. You don't have to worry about all that stuff. Right? But let's start to talk about it, because it's pretty cool, right? There's some amazing opportunities ahead of you. So let's start to think about this. Let's have those conversations. And the more time you give that seed to germinate, the better off it's going to be. Right?
Okay.
But then I think the instinct in this is to rush into specifics, is to say, do you want a big school or a small school? Do you want this amenity or that amenity? And do you want just a feature? And I would resist that temptation, as much as I would also resist the sticker price of that school is $75,000. So I promise you that's not going to happen, right? Just that may end up being the case, but probably not. The average discount rate, by the way, off that sticker price nationally is 52% on average. Okay, so when a school says, well, we cost $60,000, they actually cost about $28,000 on average. And then they're going to offer you this scholarship and that program. And so there's all kinds of ways to massage that. But let's step back from it. And to my point about don't rush into the minutia, I would start the conversation with your child to something like this. What do you like to do? Like, hey, I know you like to do this. Like, can you see yourself in a career doing that? Because my guess is, in this social media driven world, they've already been thinking about the career that they want. And have those kind of conversations. What does life look like to you? What would be an exciting thing for you to do? When you're finally out of the house, what would be super cool for you if it became your job? Have those kind of conversations, and then use your expertise, whether it's directly because you've been to college or not, you're just an older, wiser person, right? And you can say, yeah, you know what? You probably need this kind of training, or it would be helpful to you to learn these types of things. And so that's where kind of where Troove would come into play, is to help you to say, this is the kind of environment I'm looking for. These are the kind of things that are important to me. And so it's going to narrow that field. One of the things that I looked at was dating apps when I was trying to figure out the technology and the business model here. And looking at different dating apps, eHarmony actually kind of came across my radar. Now, eHarmony is not the sexiest site anymore, right? But they have been responsible for millions and millions of marriages. And their process is to give you an assessment up front. You take a quiz. And then what people don't really realize is they actually only show you the profiles of people with whom they have assessed you to have long-term potential. So they're the site where you're looking for marriage, graduation, right? They're not looking at Tinder. They're not looking at tonight and saying, are you guys attracted for a date tonight? They're saying, would you make a good life partner? And so they're narrowing the field. When you take the quick assessment, they only show you the profiles of people with whom they think there is long-term fit. And then you go to work. Then you go sort of, what looks good? I'm going to talk to these people. And then you decide for yourself. They did a study, though, that said, what was the divorce rate of people that met and married through that methodology? And what they found was the divorce rate for their people was 3.9%. So, the average divorce rate is closer to 50%.
Right.
They're more than an order of magnitude better than that. By moving the assessment up front and saying, let's assess for long-term fit and really think about what matters here, because the goal is to be married for a lifetime, not to have a great first date. And so the goal shouldn't be getting into college. It should be being a member of that learning culture for the rest of your life. And if that's the case, you need better assessment tools up front.
That is crazy. I have never heard that statistic before.
Yeah. And that became very formative for me as I was thinking about how to put together a system that essentially is a dating app for college, right? Where the goal is not getting in, it's getting out.
Yeah.
It is twice as hard to get a diploma as it is to get an acceptance letter in this country.
I have never thought of it that way. Like, our big thing, right, the conversations that we're having right now with my two older ones is getting in. I'm embarrassed to even say that now after having this conversation, because it's like, well, we should be really focusing on we probably should be focusing on the outcome, not necessarily whether or not we get in. So that's the most important.
And one takes care of the other.
Yeah.
If you do it in the right order, right? Because if you are the kind of person that is going to clearly become that engaged, vital member of a community, and the school could see them, having you graduate from, they're going to let you in. And it's always going to be hard to get into Stanford and Harvard. Okay, that's just a math problem, right? It's going to be hard to win the lottery. But that's not where most kids are. Most kids are, the average acceptance rate in America is almost 75%. But the average 4-year graduation rate is only 45%. So it's literally about twice as hard to get out as it is to get in. And if you focus on where am I most likely to get out with a degree, with the education, with the kind of nurturing environment that's going to turn me into the best version of myself, you're going to get into that school. You're going to love it. You're going to be better off for it, better served, become a better person. It's just a profoundly different and I think more productive way to look at this issue.
This is brilliant. This is brilliant. I love this technology. I love the fact that you created this, especially as a guy who, I've got a 17-year-old who's at the front of the train here. And then I've got everything in between down to a 7-year-old. And to be honest, I've really have been looking forward to this with my oldest, but dreading it on so many levels at the same time because I feel so unprepared for it. This conversation alone, though, has just helped my confidence, and how to go about it. Cause I'm like, man, I just don't know. This is really uncommon ground, but just even looking at it through this, and plus, I'm going to have my oldest and my 15-year-old, take this quiz. Cause I am so curious about what
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have if you're a parent and you want to take this, We haven't built out a really big, robust portal yet, but ultimately we're going to have, when your younger kids are coming through, we're going to have more there for you as a parent. Right now, you can sort of peer over the shoulder of your student. You can take the quiz you want if you want on your own. One of the tenets of this for us, in the same way that eHarmony only shows you the schools, or excuse me, the partners, potential partners who would be a good long-term fit for you. The promise to the student from Troove is that we're only ever going to share your results with schools that are a green, good fit for you. One of my problems as a parent with this process is, and you're going to start to feel this as your son goes from probably into his junior year, you're going to start to get inundated with junk mail. And it'll be an email box. I mean, my son actually abandoned his email box and came up with a brand new email because he was so sick of all the junk he was getting. And that's the way the system works, is they would just spam and spam and spam. And so what we're saying is, let's actually try to put a buffer in there and say to the student, Troove is only ever going to communicate your fit when there actually is a good fit. And if you take the quiz and you're not a great fit, and let's just say that your son really wanted to go to Mizzou, and he takes the quiz and he's not a great fit for Mizzou, and he's not happy about that, Troove is never going to get in the way of that, right? We're never going to go to Mizzou and say, well, guess what? Larry's kid's not a good fit for you, and they're going to put a little black mark. That's not the way this works. We would only ever communicate score results to Mizzou if there was a really great fit, and they should reach out to your son and say, hey, we'd love to chat with you, right? Because that's the business of admissions, is trying to engage with people that have that long-term potential. That's the gold standard, and that's our business model, is to help schools to find their people and only connect those, and to not participate in the junk model system that says any warm body will do, because that's where the industry is today, and that's the paradigm we've got to break.
That's where we're having issues with people. I mean, the 50%, 51% of people don't even finish their degree, or they move on to somewhere else.
Yeah. It's any warm body, right? It's an understandable thing for admissions officers who are hired and fired on how many freshmen did they get to show up in the fall, and what's the total amount of tuition revenue they're going to generate for the school. No admissions officer has ever been fired because the school's graduation rate wasn't high enough. And I'm not proposing that they should be fired for that, but I'm just saying that as the president of a college, you have the ability to drive with this technology. You can drive your admission rate and your graduation rate and your alumni engagement rate hand in hand. Because if you can see your future graduates in the pool, and you can use your current graduates to help create that model, then you're going to be dramatically better off. That the admissions piece will take care of itself because you're healing your graduation problem.
That is so cool, man. You're doing really fantastic work. And
I appreciate that. It's fun.
I love the fact that you're helping schools find their people, and you're helping the people find their schools.
Yeah. And it's, if you look at this world of college admissions too, it is highly advantaged towards the kids whose parents have the most education and the most money. And so what we're trying to do, and really central to our mission too, is to try to use technology to level that playing field a bit, and to help the kids who don't have great guidance counseling, don't have private college counselors, don't have parents who necessarily even went to college, give them the information about where they're most likely to find happiness and long-term success, and level that playing field. So there's definitely a mission orientation to this. That's, when I looked at this problem as a parent for the first time, I was intrigued by the problem of how do I get kids into college? But as soon as I figured out that this was not the problem is getting kids out of college and helping to level that playing field, that became a problem I wanted to spend my time on. And that's why I started this company.
Good for you, man. It's good work. I can't wait to actually start doing it myself, especially since we're having these conversations with our kids. I want to make sure I give you an opportunity, share with the audience where they can best find you and connect with you.
Sure. Yeah. The website is troove.me, TROOVE.me. And you are more than welcome to reach out to me personally if you'd like to. I'm happy to help. I'm not a certified college admissions counselor. I'm just a dad who's trying to make a difference, who's built a technology company I think is helping to do that. But if you want to reach out to me, you can get me on LinkedIn. You can get me at david@troove.me. Easy enough to reach out, and I will do my very best to see if we can't help you to find your perfect fit in college.
Very good, my friend. Guys, not to worry. We're going to have all the links in the show notes if you want to connect with David. Also, Troove.me. All you have to do is head on over to thedadedge.com/423 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/423. My hope was, and I don't think it's a hope, I think we definitely accomplished it, is that we David here breathed some life into any anxiety or angst that you might be feeling, as far as doesn't matter how far away you are from, or how young your kids are from maybe this decision. What I can tell you is this part of your life sneaks up on you insanely. And as we close out here, David, I'll share this quick story with you. This morning, I drove my 17-year-old to high school for the last time, and because he now has his license, and I kind of made it a big deal. I read him a letter and that I wrote last night, and just, reflecting upon the last 14 years of driving him, preschool and kindergarten and middle school, and what that's meant to me. And I went through the process in this letter of sharing with him like these milestones. I was like, I remember bringing you home from the hospital the first time. I remember, dropping you off to preschool. I remember your graduation, quote unquote, from kindergarten. I remember you graduating from 8th grade, and I remember teaching you how to drive. And in that letter, I said, it literally feels like all of that was last week. And it's been a course of 14 years, and 17 years, and now we're here knocking on the doorstep of what you and I are talking about today. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're here. I didn't even expect this to happen this fast. So it doesn't matter how old your kids are, guys. This is never too early to start conversations like this, start educating ourselves as parents, and being able to lead in this fashion, and be good guides for our kids. And you've created such a great platform for us to help us with that. So thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure, Larry. And thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. Again, guys, head on over to thedadedge.com/423 to connect with David, and Troove.me. Highly recommend it. Go out, live legendary. Take care.